Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi, day 22, and the Lori Vallow Daybell murder trial. We're going to get to that music fact of the day. The song Sultans of Swing by the Dire Straits. I love that song. I heard it this morning, so I said, I want to look up the meaning to this song. And the song was written after one of the band members watched this house band perform on a rainy night in England to an audience of what he said was a handful of drunk patrons. He said, I think the band was actually surprised they had an audience of 3 or 4. At the end of the night, the trumpet player or whoever does the announcement said, good night and thank you. We are the Sultans of Swing. And he said, there was something really funny to me because Sultans, they absolutely were not. You know, they were rather tired little blokes in pullovers. I thought that was so funny. That's all right, though. They're out there getting it, singing their stuff. All right. Thanks to everybody who's donated. I really do appreciate it. Appreciate you supporting this podcast. It's how I'm able to do what I love every day. So the big elephant in the room, Melanie Pawlowski, Lori's niece, left Idaho yesterday. She did not testify. We did not see her today in front of the judge to be questioned about her exposure. And really, there's kind of a lack of answer as to why she's not here. We just don't know. I've asked around and nobody knows what actually happened. So there you go. And I don't know that she will be called because we're near the end. I think maybe we have 1 or 2 witnesses before the state rests. And then I don't know how much of a case the defense is going to put on. I can't imagine it's going to be 4 weeks or really long at all. And I kind of think maybe in a week or so, this could all be put to bed. So we left off yesterday with Ian Pawlowski on the stand. And if you remember, the defense wanted to bring in these wiretap recordings that Ian did over the course of just a couple of weeks for the FBI. And ultimately, Judge Boyce denied these coming in. So Archibald gets up before he gets started on the cross, and he calls Ian a snitch. He said he testified to which a defense lawyer would call a snitch with some secret recordings. And so Ian identified a couple of issues on the recordings. The cops are possessed. Chad and Lori don't confess to any crime. And they wanted to play a part from December 12th or 13th. And that was a recording where Melaniece was on the phone talking to Lori or Chad. Now, December 12th is when Alex dropped over dead. And so they were discussing the death of Alex on this call, the religious issues. There was a blessing from Chad. And Mr. Archibald said the religious issues are charged by the state as an overt act as part of the conspiracy. He said the tapes are several hours, but they only wanted to play a 50-minute portion today. So Judge Boyce was like, well, why not just cross-examine on the content? And Mr. Archibald said the recording contains the best evidence and the actual statements, and the defense doesn't believe Ian's summaries of the recordings are fair and accurate. And Lindsay Blake gets up and she's like, first of all, it's objectionable to refer to the witness as a snitch. And he had safety concerns and he was assisting law enforcement. And at no point was he asked to provide a summary of these recordings. She says hearsay is an issue and Chad as a co-conspirator is an issue. She said religious beliefs are not overt acts charged by the state, but her espoused beliefs were used to control others, not that they held or believed these things. So Mr. Archibald wanted to respond, and he said, in a conspiracy case, what Chad says is not hearsay, and we've allowed Chad's statements in this trial. Co-conspirators is not hearsay, and he says Alex and Melaniece were co-conspirators, and so their statements were not hearsay. But ultimately, Judge Boyce rules it is hearsay. They don't come in. When asked on cross how he was, Ian said, I'm as well as I can be, I guess. He looked very sad and solemn on the stand again. I don't think it was put on, y'all. It was heavy for him. It was really, really heavy. I'm not going to sit here and bash anybody, but you could tell the gravity of why he was there was very much evident to him. So they go on to talk about how he and Melaniece met. In November 2019, she had recently finalized her divorce, and they got married 10 days after meeting. A few of the jurors' eyes went, whoop, they went up. and they were married in Vegas. So we know from yesterday, he talked to Lori and Chad to ask for Melaniese's hand in marriage. And he said at that time, Chad and Lori were the closest relatives she had, and she trusted them the most. So then they go on to talk about castings. And Ian says references were made during phone calls, and they're trying to expel a disembodied spirit. And even, y'all, this creeps me out. And they believed that bugs could crawl in your ear and get in your brain and possess you and all that stuff. So he's currently not working with the FBI, obviously, in any capacity. In fact, he stopped 2 weeks after he started. Nobody knew he was recording these. And Melaniece, eventually, he admitted to her after the fact that he had been recording her. So the day Alex Cox dies, it's what he called a very significant day for Melaniece. There was a phone call with Lori and Chad about Alex the day after he died. He couldn't remember. But the day Alex died, get this, Melaniece had been told by Lori and Chad, mainly Chad, that she needed to go to a place of safety because there were going to be spiritual attacks. That was the day Alex died. And apparently this was told to her like before he died. And I'm just going to say that's suspicious. Why are you calling that? He recorded a conversation also with Chad and Lori giving Melaniece a blessing. Ian said he did not know what the FBI knew, and he hoped he could get anything helpful in finding Tylee and JJ. In total, he thinks he did 9 recordings. He says he's heard bits and pieces leading up to the trial, and the last time that he heard any of these recordings was at the grand jury, and about 10 minutes of these recordings were played. The context were discussions with Ian and Melaniece and recordings with Lori, Chad, Alex, and Zulema. So Ian was questioning Melaniece to see kind of what she was hearing from them. The recording that had everybody present, Alex was sick. I think a few days before that, he had been complaining about burning in his chest or something. And y'all, I ain't gonna lie, I about fell out the pew when they said this. Lori said she was able to cast Satan out of Alex by folding him up like a taco and shipping him to Antarctica. Not even kidding, y'all. I did a little Twitter video at lunch today because guess what? My amazing camera guy, Will, who's I'm going to miss so much when we leave. He's such a nice dude. He's great. I just can't say enough good things. So I don't even think Will listens, but Will, if you do, like you're amazing. And I appreciate everything you've done. But Will had tacos for me today for lunch. He grabs our lunch right before, since my time frame is really, really close. And so I did a little video with tacos. But yeah, she folded Satan up like a taco and shipped him to Antarctica. Ian said he also gave Melaniece a blessing of comfort that day. And he's asked if he's hearing a blessing chatting Lori gave in the recordings. And he said he can't remember because blessings were flying around all over the place. So Thomas says the blessings were for comfort and not nefarious. And Ian said now it feels more like manipulation. He said Melaniece was manipulated more than anyone in the most dark times in her life because she had been divorced and she lost custody. He said there's no shortage of people trying to take advantage of Melaniece, and Lori was one of them. And Lori's eyebrows kind of raised when he said that. I like to watch her when people that are connected to her are on the stand just to see how it is. It has to be so bizarre. You haven't seen most of these people in over 3 years now, and then they're on the stand against you. So she did not like that comment. Mr. Thomas asked what kind of interactions with law enforcement shows Lori manipulated Melaniece. And he said things came out that showed Lori wasn't truthful. She said Brandon and law enforcement were dark and were kind of stalling their mission. He said, really, all law enforcement was trying to do were find the kids. He said that they never said anything bad about him on these conversations. I really think Ian came across as very credible with the jury. They took notes. He seemed credible to me. It seemed genuine. Ian, he came in this game so late. He had no idea what he was stepping into. So let that be a word to all y'all youngins watching this or listening to this. Don't get married to somebody after 10 days. You don't know what they're bringing, but they're still married. They've been married for over 3.5 years and they have a child together now. So who am I to judge? He said Alex's passing was a huge deal for Melaniece because they were very close. And he was there with Melaniece when Zulema called to tell her the news that Alex had passed. So then Melaniece calls Lori and Chad, and she was crying and said she felt spiritual demons were attacking her. Ian said there were realities with Lori and Chad, that spiritual elements were laid over reality. But he doesn't think Lori and Chad were trying to manipulate Melaniece that day that Alex died. He said, I don't believe a spiritual attack killed Alex. And Chad and Lori put shields of light around Melaniece that day. So she was all good. Ian was excused, and the defense may recall Ian in their case. The state was good to release him, but Mr. Thomas asked that he not be released because he said, honestly, I don't think he'll come back if he's called. Ultimately, his attorney, as we know, accompanied him and said that he would show up. So he was let go. The next witness was Taylor Ballard. She's with Ballard Insurance Group. That's a health insurance group in Rexburg. Chad was a client of hers, and on October 31st, 2019, he came in because the insurance he had through Tammy's employment was expiring on November 1st, and he asked for insurance for 3 of his kids, Seth, Leah, and Mark. So at that point, Idaho was looking to expand Medicaid to adults in January of 2020, and he said his income would be really different without Tammy's income because she was the breadwinner and he was selling $2,000 a year in books. They said they could cover him in November and December if he qualified for Medicaid. And given the situation, she applied for Medicaid for January. On November 5th, she went to some place to apply for him, just given the situation that he was dealing with. The health and welfare interface saw his previous income and said it was higher than what he told this representative. So he actually qualified for the marketplace coverage. And she had a date wrong, and it was on February 5th, she went to health and welfare. And so they asked for a copy of Chad's tax return for this marketplace health insurance. She texted Chad, and he responded that he was out of state all week. He said he would bring it in the next week, and he did. She took it to health and welfare, and he qualified for the tax credit. She talked to him again on November 21st about the options that he had with that insurance, and it was just going to be for him and Mark, but he did ask about adding a spouse. And she said he would need to do that within 60 days of their marriage. She heard from Chad again on December 10th, 2019 by phone. She responded on the 11th. That is the day Tammy Daybell was being Zoomed, by the way. She said she has a file on her clients, and she provided everything she had on Chad, by the way, to law enforcement. So Chad called to pay his January premium, but he hadn't picked a plan, and so he didn't have insurance. Eventually he did, and he paid, and they discussed coverage for his son, Mark. She heard from him again on March 11th, 2020 to get insurance for Lori. And she said, hey, look, buddy, you're out of luck. You passed the 60-day window of when you were married. And he said, but she's incarcerated. And he was worried something was going to happen to her, but he said she was maybe going to get out in a week. I wonder if that's like when the neighbors were maybe going to put their house up, and he thought she was going to spring out of there and they were just going to go back to Hawaii, but didn't happen, did it? He also asked for dental insurance. And hey, by the way, I thought Lori didn't need insurance when she was trying to get it for Charles and JJ and Tyler, and she didn't get it and told Charles she didn't need it. Also, she didn't have to tinkle and bullets would bounce off of her. But I'm telling you what, you go to 7-Eleven and get a big Slurpee, translated or not, you're going to have to pee-pee. When asked in November if there were any children, he said no. That was the end of direct. Mr. Thomas came up for cross, and he said that, you filled out this information for Chad. He said his income without Tammy would be around $20,000 a year. And so she refreshes her memory with her notes, and the health and welfare estimated his income to be $30,000. Cross was over. There was no redirect. And next up was Angela Yancey, and she worked with Salem Sugar District schools as benefit and payroll administration. She knew Tammy, and they would have the yearly meetings for open enrollment about your benefits that you get with working for a school district. We know Tammy changed her life insurance policy in 2019. She filled out the form and submitted it, and they showed us those documents. And that was for the life map change. That was a voluntary life insurance policy. And when they're hired, they can elect a $10,000 option that can be increased during open enrollment. So Tammy was hired in 2017 and got the minimum of $10,000. And she didn't ask for an increase in 2018, but she did in 2019. So she also elected to have spouse coverage, and they showed those were signed on September 8th. Increase would have gone into effect on September 1st, and that total amount was $80,000 and then $50,000 from the group life insurance policy. The $80,000 was 5 times her salary. We see the beneficiary statement submitted by Chad. Get this, y'all. Chad showed up to the school 2 days after Tammy died. She died on a Saturday. That Monday, he was there to sign that form. She said it's unusual for a spouse to come in so soon. I mean, obviously. She said they couldn't submit the claim until they had the original death certificate. And Chad's like, I've ordered 8. And she said the norm is about 3. He came back on the 25th of October, but she was out of town, so he came back on the 30th. The employer statement is now on the screen that she completed, and she attached the death certificate and then submitted it. So there were no further questions from the state. Mr. Thomas was up for cross. He said there were a few different policies, and she said 2. He said the group insurance is free to all employees, and she says for full-time employees. And the $50,000 is offered to every employee. So the first year she had the minimum of $10,000. She would pay $1.93 a month for that $10,000 in life insurance benefits. This more that she gets later, that was around $15 a month, and the amount that you pay is based on your age. And that was the end of her testimony. So next up is Officer Collin Nesbit. He's from the Kauai Police. He first contacted Lori January 5th, 2020. That was when they served Lori with the order to produce the children here in Idaho. She was located at a condo, and she was in the swimming pool area with Chad. And so she was given a copy of this order and asked if she had any questions. So we get to see this video, y'all. And the video shows Lori and Chad at the pool. Lori's laying in a lounge chair. Chad's right beside her. Lori's got on a teeny weeny blue bikini. And they ask Lori, how's it going? And she says, hi. And they ask, are you Chad and Lori? And she says, yes. By the way, Chad did not have a shirt on. Just y'all visualize it, okay? She was reading the paperwork. She looked annoyed to me. She looked really annoyed they were there. She spends like 20 seconds kind of looking it over. Then she sort of looks up at the cops. Chad was leaning in trying to read this document as well. And they ask if she has any questions, and she shakes her head no, and they leave. It was so bizarre to see them just, for me, it's like my mind goes to here she is in Hawaii laying in a bikini, and those babies are buried in frozen ground in Rexburg. And it made my skin crawl to see that. They executed a search warrant on January 26, 2020. I think it was like a couple of days later. They were driving the car going to the Kauai Beach Resort, which Kay Woodcock said was like her favorite resort. And actually, Kay and Larry, I believe, had stayed there with Charles and JJ and Lori and Tylee at one point. They initiated a traffic stop at the resort, and Lori was driving. Chad was also in the car. Both were taken out of the car, and Lori was given an opportunity to get like personal paperwork or any kind of medication. And they gave her the search warrant to look over and just a second to get necessity out. She wasn't able to just take everything. They gave her the cash that she had in there as well as some medications. So they looked through her purse with the search warrant. They found that bank card belonging to Tylee. So he knew Tylee was missing, and he did not give that card back to Lori. He put it in the front seat, in like the driver's seat. But as they were putting the car up after putting it on the little hoister thing, I guess, to tow it, it fell down in the seat, and they took a picture of that. They show photos of the search warrant. One was an exterior of the Ford Explorer from the evidence warehouse. So they did take it from the scene to go process it. Inside the front with the driver in the passenger seat, there were 2 water bottles in the cup holders, a purse, and a book. And so they took a picture of that close up of the bank card for Tylee where it fell. And Lori was looking at the screen at this point. I have in my notes. So they seized Lori's cell phone, and they show a photo of that. The back seat, the seats were folded down. There were 2 bikes, and the bottom of a floorboard was a bag that had birth certificates, death certificates, as well as a marriage certificate, a patriarchal blessing, a rental agreement. They seized a backpack that had 2 computers, 3 iPads, one of which had JJ written in red on the back. documents in a book called Visions of Glory. That's a doomsday book. I looked it up. There were close-ups of those iPads. So she had 14 or 15 copies of Charles Vallow's death certificate. Who needs that many? What is the deal unless you trying to get some money or something? You use those when you need them for official stuff. Why is she carrying everybody's birth certificates and death certificates around? There was also a rental property printout for the condo. So they show two different versions of a birth certificate for JJ, the original from when he was born in Louisiana, and then the adoption birth certificate where the name change happened. There were social security cards for Tylee and JJ. There was a receipt for Madison Schools for JJ. Tylee's birth certificate. There was Blue Sky Property Management, which was dated August 26th, and this was for Idaho. It had Lori, Tylee, and JJ's names on it. So they also showed a photo of Alex's patriarchal blessing, the Jansport backpack, a bag of envelope with cash that was found inside that backpack. Then there was this summary, like a clinical summary with Lori's name on it. I think she had been seen for something on the island. I believe April Raymond said that at some point too. And there was this sticky with various words written on it. And it was like goal mad. And it said Blake Hilpus. I looked up a couple of these things. It's like warriors. And then somebody tweeted me and said these names are associated with World of Warcraft. So I don't know if it was a coincidence or if somebody liked World of Warcraft. And so he went on cross and Mr. Thomas was up for the defense. He asked what they were looking for with those warrants. And the witness says any evidence of JJ and Tylee. Then he shows a photo of the front seat of the car and it shows the book in the passenger seat and Lori's purse. He says he doesn't remember if he actually collected the purse itself. And he's asked if he took any trace evidence from the car and he says no. So then they show that close up of Tylee's bank card and he asks if there's any trace evidence around the card. We see long blonde hair kind of in the floorboard. It was like black carpet, which I'm going to tell you, I have black carpet in my Jeep right now, and I can't stand black carpet. It shows everything, but they did not collect trace evidence, which then Mr. Thomas says, well, if you were looking for a child, wouldn't you do that? And the witness was like, yeah, I guess. So there was a bag and it just said Hawaii on it. It's kind of one of those touristy bags you might get like from an airport, and it's a Robin Ruth bag. And Mr. Thomas is like, how do you know it was a Robin Ruth bag? And he said, because it was on the bag. So he asked if this is where the documents were found, and he said yes. So then they show again the contents of that bag, which was like the iPad, the folders, the book. The amount of cash found in the car was somewhere between $5,000 and $5,500, by the way. So on redirect, when asked about trace evidence, did you find any evidence of kids? And the witness says no. He's asked how many bikes were in the car, and he said one. And she notes there's no place for a kid to sit or any evidence they were at the pool or in the condo or anywhere like that. So the last witness up is Officer Ryan Pillar. He's with Gilbert PD in Arizona, and he was involved in investigating the attempt on Brandon and then kind of got involved with the other stuff too. He recounts the story that Brandon left home with his 4 kids, took the 3 older ones to school. The youngest went to Melaniece, and he went to the gym and returned home and was shot at. They collected ring footage and confirmed, get this, I didn't know this, a Jeep was idling in front of his house for an hour and a half, and the Jeep had no wheel on the back of the car. Why Alex had to remove the rear tire, I'm going to put a link in the description with my Jeep showing you why you have to remove that tire, but essentially you can't get that back window open if your spare tire is on the back of your Jeep. It has to be removed or you can't open it. Witnesses heard a gunshot at 9:14 a.m. That's around the time Brandon returned home, and that was confirmed with like his cell phone information. There was a bullet hole in the door jamb of Brandon's Tesla. Projectile fragments were found, and the windshield was shattered, and shards of glass were in the roadway where the shot happened. I mean, Mr. Thomas is objecting left and right. It was flying all over the room to any statements Brandon made because it's hearsay. He says Brandon had no known enemies. He knew Brandon had a spousal dispute and was involved in getting divorced. He said his Aunt Lori had a brother who shot her husband, Charles. Gilbert PD eventually just reaches out to Chandler PD because of this. and they were told about Charles's murder. They also knew that Lori, Tylee, and JJ were present at the scene when Charles was murdered. So then they learned this Jeep Wrangler was there at the house the day Charles was murdered. It's included in their crime scene photos. Tylee was driving the Jeep, although it was registered to Charles. And the Jeep became just a prime piece of evidence in their investigation into the shooting. They checked license plate readers and found the Jeep was captured coming south from Idaho Falls into Arizona on October 1st, 2019. They see the Jeep going back up to Idaho on October 3rd. One camera was a DEA camera that got the Jeep coming into the Phoenix area with what? No spare tire on the back. They learned Tammy died, and actually it was Brandon who told them. He spoke with Idaho authorities about Tammy, the Jeep, and what he called their suspect, Alex Cox. They found cell phone data that showed he was parked at Brandon's at the time of the shooting and went back to Idaho. They had pings all the way there and back. They wanted to talk to Lori and Melaniece, and they also wanted to check on the welfare of JJ and Tylee. Kay at this point had talked to investigators in Arizona, concerned because they haven't seen or heard from JJ in a while. So that was how that request was sent to Idaho to locate JJ and Tylee. Idaho authorities found the Jeep, and on November 26th, the day of the welfare check, they were told, as we know, Melanie Gibb had JJ. And so he walks through trying to get in touch with Melanie Gibb. She calls Gilbert police later that night, does not call Rexburg for a few days, I believe. And initially we know she lied. But what they did was they set up poll cams at Melanie Gibb's residence and made contact with family and friends of Lori and Tylee, as well as JJ's previous school. We know Colby said he hadn't seen Tylee or JJ. And so we're kind of walking through what's previously been testified to, which is it becomes really clear really fast. These kids have not been seen by anybody since September. So the investigation into Brandon's attempt continued, and they processed Brandon's car. And then 3 officers from Gilbert PD flew to Idaho to process that Jeep. And they did find gunshot residue from the rear of the Jeep. Not that it was a question. They go on to talk about Tylee's cell phone data. It showed the phone was used in Arizona and Idaho. And at the point of their investigation, it was showing the phone in Kauai. In December, Lori and Chad were there. It also showed that phone in Missouri for a brief time. That's when she went up to visit Audrey with Melaniece to see all the sites. Brandon and Melaniece had a life insurance policy that required they both sign to make that null and void. And had Brandon been killed, Melaniece would have gotten $220,000 plus. And she had also received a payout as part of their divorce. I mean, it was objection, objection, objection. And he says money had been exchanged, objection. There were Venmo exchanges that had happened and significant amounts referenced in text messages between the parties of Lori, Chad, Alex, Melaniece. So Tylee, as we know, was never enrolled in college. No evidence she ever drove the Jeep after September of 2019. Mr. Thomas said he won't cross because of 404B, and they don't want to lose that right on appeal. So the witness was finished. The witness, as he's leaving, he thanks the judge and then he thanks the jury. So Mr. Thomas wants that stricken. And so he tells the jury, to disregard that. So the next witness for the state was lengthy, and they said they would not start that witness tomorrow. So then we have this evidentiary hearing. And essentially, this is someone with the FBI who's been very involved with every aspect of this case. And he had made a PowerPoint that condenses the over 100,000 pages of documents or whatever they have on this case into a PowerPoint. Ultimately, the defense was saying it was argumentative. It was forming opinions, essentially. We have this long hearing. So to make a long story short, this document cannot come in. The defense didn't want the witness to come in either, but the witness can come in. The thing that can kind of remedy this is if the witness were to redo this PowerPoint and leave out kind of the inflammatory stuff and just do like sort of a timeline or things like that. I mean, this kind of had sections to it, and it was like their beliefs, manipulation, and things like that. And the defense said this sounds like a closing argument more than a PowerPoint, and Judge Boyce agreed. So here's the deal. We don't know what's up because the state asked if they could move this witness who was originally scheduled for tomorrow to Monday. Judge Boyce said, hey, look, you decide the order of your witnesses, but I'm not calling off court for tomorrow. Now, tomorrow is a short day. We're finished at noon, and then that's it for tomorrow. But apparently she said she would have that witness redo that PowerPoint. I do not know who's going to be up tomorrow. So either it's going to be, this is Special Agent Hart, I believe, from the FBI, or I kind of expect Detective Ray Hermosillo to be one of the last ones. I really thought it would be Melaniece, but I mean, I think that ship has sailed. So we're getting there, y'all. And then we'll see who the state's going to bring up. And I'm kind of hopeful maybe in a week or so I'll be back in Greenville full time. It's all right, though. I'm enjoying Boise. It's a great city. I've met some great people, but man, I'm missing my family and my babies and my fur babies and my bed and everything else. But I love what I do, and I'm glad to bring it to you every day. All right, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow for what I'm sure is going to be a very short episode because we only have 3.5 hours of testimony. So, all right, we will catch you on the flip side. Have a good rest of your evening.